Good morning, happy Friday, and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you as always. Amber, welcome back. Happy Friday.
Thanks, Lindsay. Happy Friday.
Weekend plans?
I'm going to the Georgetown basketball game against UConn tomorrow.
Ooh,
so I'm excited
nice.
about that. You know what's really sad? It's my last year as a young alumni.
Oh, gosh.
I know.
They start to, you don't even check the box. It's like, are you 25 to whatever, 35? I'm like, why am I moving boxes? And when I put boxes, it's like deeply offensive because the box span is so big. I'm like, what have I done the last decade?
It's brutal.
Yes.
It's tough. All right, coming up on Rising, Venezuela opposition leader Maria Corina Machado visited the White House and gifted President Trump her physical Nobel Peace Prize.
Plus, in a show of support for Denmark, several European leaders are sending troops to Greenland as the White House continues to express their desire to acquire Greenland.
And there's new polling out on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's Senate primary bid against James Tallarico. But first, Lindsay, what's in your lens?
Let's talk about it. So right now, Minnesota feels a little bit like a pressure cooker. And what's happening there is bigger than just one city, one governor, or one president. I think it's a snapshot of what happens when immigration becomes a political weapon instead of a policy problem that demands grown-up solutions. So Governor Tim Walz tried to lower the temperature as tensions escalated in Minneapolis, urging protesters to remain peaceful and asking President Trump to step back from threatening to deploy the U.S. military. He took to X with this appeal, writing in part, quote, "I am making a direct appeal to the president. Let's turn down the temperature. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are." That's not too radical language. That's a governor trying to prevent a bad situation from becoming worse. But the backdrop matters here. Minneapolis has seen aggressive, large-scale federal immigration enforcement actions, protests, and now 2 federal agent-involved shootings in just 1 week. 1 American citizen, as you all know, is dead. In response, President Trump floated invoking the Insurrection Act, a dramatic escalation that would give federal troops expanded authority over law enforcement inside the state. This goes far beyond Title X, which allows the National Guard to support local law enforcement. The Insurrection Act is a sledgehammer, not a scalpel. Mayor Jacob Fry also pushed back, warning against further escalation. He wrote on X, quote, "Minnesota needs ICE immigration and customs enforcement to leave, not an escalation that brings additional federal troops beyond 3,000 already here. My priority is keeping local law enforcement focused on public safety, not diverted by federal overreach." Again, that's a local leader saying more force isn't the same as more safety. A CNN poll backs that up, released on Wednesday. It found that 51% of Americans believe the presence of ICE officers in cities across the U.S. has made people, quote, less safe. The White House has accused Walz, Fry, and other Democrats of inflaming tensions. In a statement to The Hill, spokesperson Abigail Jackson said, quote, "Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, and Democrat leaders in Minnesota have done nothing but turn up the temperature, smear heroic ICE officers, and incite violence against them, all in defense of criminal illegal aliens." Now, this back and forth reduces what was a complex policy failure into villains and slogans, while the chaos on the ground is just still continuing. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Both sides have helped get us here. Republicans blame Democrats for the migrant crisis, pointing to Biden's policies and sanctuary cities. Democrats argue Republicans exploit immigration politically, sabotage bipartisan solutions like the 2024 border bill, and rely on rhetoric that's rooted more in fear than facts. What's missing is the urgency around actual legislation. Even voices in Trump's own orbit have been signaling concern. Joe Rogan, for example, who voted for Trump, has openly said he feels like this is going too far.
And then I can also see the point of view of the people that say, yeah, but you don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
CNN's Abby Phillip asked the most basic, necessary question. If this crisis is truly that serious, why isn't Congress legislating instead of escalating?
They control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And they have a Supreme Court that is in their favor. So why is it, explain to me, 12 months of Donald Trump, no legislation whatsoever on immigration?
At some point, someone has to be the adult in the room. We're past the blame game. We're here now with real people, real communities, and real risk. If lawmakers across the spectrum are serious about safety, order, and humanity, then de-escalation and workable immigration legislation aren't optional. They're the only way out of this chaos.
All right, lots to potentially discuss here.
Yeah.
I guess let's start with the legislative aspect of this, because one thing that I've been curious about is there obviously have been a lack of conversations between Democrats and Republicans on the Hill in terms of a potential legislative quote-unquote fix to the immigration issue. But I'm curious about what the specifics are that people are looking for on immigration legislation. Is it amnesty? Is it more border security? What specifically do people want Republicans to do that Trump is not?
Well, I think the fact that Trump is making decisions that are, the conversations start with some friction with these Democratic mayors. And then he's just like, well, I'm doing this because it's within my rights to send ICE there. To me, that's not a solution that's going to just go and not get any pushback. So if Congress does look at this and say, okay, we didn't pass the bill in 2024 that people thought would do many different things, not what the president's doing right now, closing the border and some other things, they should sit down and talk about what solutions Congress wants to work for. So that requires the people that are voted into office to go talk to their constituents and see what immigration reform they wanted. If we talk about polls from the election season in 2024, you'll remember a lot of people agreed that Biden dropped the ball with immigration. A lot of people agreed that they wanted some kind of reform. So it really wouldn't be only through my lens about what perspective I would want to see done. But I think the entire country was on the similar page. They want to see something done. But now there are voices that voted for Trump and were adamant in getting him elected and really catalysts for it that are criticizing they didn't want this done. So it's really up to all American people that feel so, I guess, overwhelmed by the action happening right now to talk to their local officials and say, here's what we want to see happen in Congress, because nothing's being done. And really, sometimes it requires all these leaders proposing ideas and really sitting down and doing their jobs in Congress and coming to us, the American people, with a bipartisan solution, since the 2024 proposal was not it for people. And I really thought that the Trump administration was going to move forward and push through a new legislation when he got in office. But that didn't happen. I thought that would be immediate because he had reportedly told a lot of congressional members not to vote for that legislation. So I thought the first thing on his agenda, outside of just sending ICE to cities, would be to get something on the books.
Yeah, one of the first bill that Congress did pass when Trump took office was the Laken-Riley Act, which basically made it easier for illegal aliens with criminal histories to be detained and deported, but not, I guess, the comprehensive immigration legislation that some people were looking for. On the Insurrection Act, I do think, it's important to look at what that is actually meant to do, which is it gives the federal government the ability to send in the National Guard in situations where there is unlawful obstruction or rebellion. And what we've been seeing in Minneapolis, both before and after the death of Renee Good, was mass protests, but not just people filming ICE or watching or protesting, but actually getting involved in the situation and obstructing law enforcement proceedings. There are groups like Minnesota ICE Watch that actually encourage people to try to pry suspects out of ICE's custody, to use their vehicles to block ICE's movement. And in the aftermath of the death of Renee Good, there were actually riots taking place in Minneapolis where people were breaking into law enforcement vehicles, stealing weapons, graffitiing the vehicles, stealing personal information of ICE agents. And so I'm actually wondering where the line is for Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, because I think we're actually past due for that moment.
Well, I think that the Democratic leadership in Minnesota and Minneapolis have now been saying, let's bring the temperature down. So my bigger point outside of what he can do next is hopefully the best next step is to get everybody at least in conversation to figure out what the long-term solution is. So even if National Guard comes, that's not a long-term solution. I just like to see adults at the table because no one wants to see this happening in Minnesota.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. But up next, Venezuela's Maria Machado visited D.C. on Thursday and presented the Nobel Peace Prize to President Trump. We'll be right back.